What is going on, everybody? I've been waiting all day to do this. I have a really special guest, someone who I watch incessantly with him and his co-host, Bonta Hill, especially when they talk 49ers and they're passionate about it. And I was like, let me give this thing a shot. And Joe has been gracious enough to join me here. So Joe Shasky, Butcher Boy, welcome to the channel. Welcome to 49ers First Takes.
I mean, let's do it. What an intro. I mean, you guys got this thing decked out. We should get you on the digital team for 95.7 The Game. Let's do this.
Oh, I got to give credit to my boy, Jesse Naylor. He runs Last Second Sports YouTube channel. He's
very familiar.
He's done a couple of my overlays and stuff. And usually mine consist of just like copying, pasting stuff over an existing picture. I don't know how to do any of the other stuff, but
yeah, me neither.
So I'm gonna let you have the floor for a second. I was talking to one of my co-hosts that I do a show on Monday with, and he's like, when you talk to him, ask him like his passions and stuff instead of just being like, let's go talk football. So, what's your story? What got you into radio? We were talking a little bit off stream, but you didn't elaborate too much.
Yeah.
What's your story of how you got into radio? And I would love to hear about it. I'm sure the people that listen to you would like to hear it too.
Yeah, I'm probably have a very unique path into the media industry. I still don't consider myself a member of the media. I'm a dude that loves sports. And I know that sounds really like foolish. I got kicked out of a zillion high schools. I played ball my whole entire life. I never went to college. I've been working since I was 15 years old. I mean, a lot of people can relate to that, and I think that gives me a lot of different experiences that I draw from. I have been a seeded and breeded San Franciscan. I'm a fifth generation San Franciscan. I mean, I grew up right near Candlestick, and a lot of people, know that as the Bayview Excelsior area. And so, in our family, the religion of sports was like a real thing. I played basketball and baseball my whole life. My parents wouldn't let me play football because I was playing basketball and baseball, but the Niners were my passion. And so my grandfather had season tickets going back to the very first year, 1946, at Kezar. My dad had season tickets from 77 on. So I was lucky enough by the time I was born, I was going to games on Sunday. And if I wasn't, I was pissed off that my brother was going or that my sister was going or that my mom was going or whatever. And so when I obviously became about a teenager, I think I've probably been to 150, 200 games at Candlestick. You know what I mean? Like, not many people can say that. And so as an adult, I obviously was going to all the games, and I used to call in. I was a legitimate butcher, working as a young man in a butcher shop. And when I was 14, 15 years old, I was the cleaning the saws and whatnot. And this is how the nickname came about. I used to call into post-game shows. This is what I would do. I would call in after the Niner game, call in after the Giants game, call in after a Warrior game. And so they had this big bandsaw that the OGs would cut meat on, and they'd break beef. The name of the bandsaw was Butcher Boy. So they started calling me the Butcher Boy. And this is when I was, a kid still playing travel baseball and basketball and whatnot. And my family needed the money, so I was working after odds and ends, and the name kind of stuck. That was like my caller name. So progressed into my 20s. I started my own business, pulled out a zillion loans. We were lucky we made it as long as we did. We lasted a couple years. I used to call into Damon Bruce all the time, and eventually I got this epiphany. Now, this is before iPhones and everything was all the way it is now. This guy, Sal Castaneda, who's a local TV guy, hits me up on Twitter. And he says, you need to come do a podcast with me. Well, I come and do the podcast with him and a guy, Matt Steinmetz, who's on 95.7 The Game right now. Now, I've been calling into sports game shows for years locally. And they said, you need to start your own podcast. I'm like, I don't even have the equipment. And I started doing recordings on this old ass Macintosh, and I was posting things on SoundCloud like I was a rapper, if you will. And I mean, thinking back on it, I was getting like 5 listens. I mean, literally 5 listens. And what I would do was make an episode every time, every single week, and I'd send it to the program director at KMBR, to the guy at the game. And no one would ever respond. After like 3 years of me doing this every single week, eventually I got a call. They said, come on in. I know this is a long-winded story, so bear with me. They tell me to come on in. And Damon was kind of my homie, Damon Bruce, who does the afternoon show. And he's like, hey, I want you to meet the program director. Come do an hour with me. Now, this guy who was the program director at the time saw me as like a character, like, me do a bunch of free stuff for them. Maybe it would work on to like some, like, I was thinking like Howard Stern. I'm like, this guy's trying to take advantage of me. Like, I'm one of the characters on Howard Stern. And so I did an hour with Damon Bruce, and he was blown away. A week later, that guy gets fired. Somebody else doesn't show up for a couple of shifts. He gets fired. The new guy comes in, and somebody behind the scenes was campaigning for me because they were listening to my podcast, which I didn't even know anybody was listening to except family and friends. and I got an opportunity, and it was the day Richard Sherman signed with the 49ers. I remember it like it was yesterday. I walked into the studio 2 minutes later, we're about to go on air, and Richard Sherman signs with the Niners. It's like God tapping me on the shoulder.
Right.
Hot magma show for like 3 hours. I hop on BART. I'm on my way back home. My wife's like, oh, it's a one-time deal. The program director, I thought, was calling me to tell me I'm never coming back. He's like, I want to offer you a part-time position. Took the part-time position, and kind of the rest is history. I took every single slot, every shift that they could give me. I was working, and still am working 2 jobs, trying to balance it out. I'm married. I've got family, and so there's a lot of things I'm trying to balance. And then eventually I got an opportunity to do nights kind of parlayed during COVID. People left. I got an opportunity to go on the morning show, and me and Bonte had kind of dreamed about it 5-10 years ago. Like, hey, it would be great to have our own morning show. We literally thought it into existence, and here we are today. We got the #1 Bay Area sports show, #2 in the market overall, and to say it's a dream come true is an understatement. I wake up the city that I'm born and raised in talking about the teams I love.
That's awesome.
There's nobody more blessed than me, and I don't take it for granted.
It's awesome that you have that attitude too, but I can understand why you have a thankful attitude, because you literally, so to speak, sold yourself out. You did everything you could to get where you had to be, and nothing was handed to you. Nothing was given. One of my best friends on YouTube here, 49er Minded, he actually shared the stream and was kind enough to have some kind words when he was sharing it. He was talking, excuse me, about the Whack Pack from Howard Stern, and you said you did not want to become a character. And I thought about, like, all the characters on there, even Baba Booey, one of the actual guys that was on the show, and I'm like, yeah, that would suck if that's all they saw you as. And the fact that they didn't, or at least that one guy did, but you actually became what you are now, is freaking awesome. That is a different story, because everybody else's stories usually come from like a Larry Krueger, like a scouting background or something, and then they got into it, and then all of a sudden they're on radio. But you pretty much manifested it on your own, and that is that's insane. That's awesome. It's awesome.
It really is. And I think one of my things, like, because you see so many people creating content now, and I find it inspirational. People like yourself, all the different people that are making things, whether it's podcasts, whether it's YouTube, a combination of them, Instagram. Like, I see so many unique points of view. One of the things that really sparked me was that I felt like the people talking about my teams didn't have the same passion and knowledge that we did, the fans. Yep. And I never felt like we were getting our just due, and it felt like we were being underserved. And like, I know it sounds corny, but the reality is, like, how many people are talking about your team and you're like, oh, come on, man. Like, seriously, you've been a Niner fan for like 5 seconds, or you've been covering the team for 3 minutes, and you were a Packer beat reporter beforehand, or you were a Cubs fan, or whatever it might be. And it's like, us Niner fans, we're here for life. What I mean? I know you were talking about following this team since day one. And so many times I would hear things and I'd be like, why can't they care like we care? And I'm hoping to fill that void for a lot of people.
I've been a Niners fan. I'll be 43 in December. I've been a Niners fan since like 89, 90. I got into football kind of late. The Niners were the top team. So I guess you could say I was a bandwagon fan back in the late 80s, but I was a kid, so it's like whatever. But I stuck with them through some really good football from the early 90s to say like maybe 97, 98, and through all the bad stuff up until Harbaugh. And it's just been an idea to do something like this. Now, I'm not what you consider, I have like a good amount of subs, but I'm more of like a soundbite guy. I used to do a lot of like uploading of just my voice with a still picture on YouTube. So I don't have maybe say like the following of like guys like Grant Cohn or whatever, but I just started seeing a lot of people do similar stuff. Oh, the 49ers YouTube community is very well represented. It's huge.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, I would love to do that. I have kind of a unique voice. I kind of sound like Howard Stern, Ray Romano, something along the lines of Kermit the Frog. So I'm like, I think people just by my voice will be like, oh, what? And then maybe hear what I have to say. Now, I am not the most knowledgeable 49ers fan as far as like film breakdown or draft prospects. But if it comes to just the passion about the team and having a different opinion than some people, because some people like they have a platform and they want to stay neutral. Mm-hmm. And then there's people like yourself or people like I think myself and maybe some of the guys that I have in here who are not afraid to go against the grain and be like, dude, that was a horrible move, or man, I wish Trey Lance was still playing. I can't stand Jimmy Garoppolo. And, you say stuff like that and people give you all sorts of problems. And it's like, but I'm a fan. I'm supposed to give that kind of an opinion. What got me to really, really want to have you on here, besides the fact that you like Star Wars, is the fact that I saw right after Trey Lance got hurt and that whole game ended, and there was just a lot of like, it was weird. It was like this weird vibe where almost like people were not too concerned because we had Jimmy. And I saw your just passionate, kind of like an emotional, visceral reaction to the whole situation. Do you still feel that emotional about the situation, as far as like, how much of a big situation him getting hurt and not getting a chance to get his reps and become, the entrenched starter and having to wait another year and stuff like that? Like, a lot of people kind of moved on really quickly because Jimmy was here. I'm still kind of in between. Like, I'm happy the Niners are doing good. I'm glad Jimmy's here, as far as like, he's the best option we got. But by no means am I like, rah, Jimmy, go, go, go. I'm not that guy. What is your feeling on that situation as you speak?
It's so interesting. Like, you bring up Trey or Jimmy and people want you to pick sides. And it's like, no, let's just move Jimmy to the side for right now. I'll get to him in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Trey Lance, this organization traded 3 picks or swapped 2 and moved up 1, or however you want to view it. It traded a lot of picks to go get Trey Lance. All right. More than any other draft trade that they've ever consummated in the history of the organization. I have a deep history of this team. They have never traded this amount draft capital. All right. That's number 1. Number 2, you have an obligation as the head coach, whether you're Mike Nolan with Alex Smith, whether you're Jim Harbaugh with Colin Kaepernick, you have to nurture, develop, and keep your quarterback upright. I don't care who you are. When you invest the amount of time, energy, and money that they have into the quarterback position, we want to see it work. Like, period. The backup can be great and they might be able to fill in or whatever, but like, make it work. My biggest issue, and now we go back to Jimmy, my biggest issue with Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan, clearly they were never on the same page. Kyle never nurtured him. Kyle never embraced him. And I don't blame Jimmy Garoppolo. He's got his own shortcomings. No quarterback is perfect. They all have pluses and minuses, some more so than others. But like, clearly it felt like that relationship had run its course. Okay, so you pivoted to Trey Lance. And this is how you treat the kid? And my thing is, it's not the singular play he got hurt. It's the totality with how he was being used. I've been watching football my whole life. I've been going to games my whole life. Like everybody, we watch on TV. The quarterback was getting hit way too much. And you can tell me, Joe, he's a running quarterback. I don't care if he's Cam Newton and Michael Vick and Lamar Jackson rolled into one. When you get hit 17 times a game, you are not going to last 9 weeks. It's a fact. All right. And guys like Lamar are very astute to getting down, going out of bounds. They run to the outside against smaller guys. You could see it coming a mile away. And my biggest issue was the lack of empathy and remorse from the head coach. No one's saying that you're the worst guy in the world and that you deliberately hurt him. We're saying, dude, read the room. The number 3 pick got his ankle shattered because he ran through the tackles. Like, it's mind-boggling to me. And so, yes, I was hurt for Trey Lance, number 1. And number 2, I thought that the coach did himself no favors because of his attitude in the post-game presser. And I love Shanahan. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, I did. I did feel the lack of empathy, even from some players, maybe like, say, a Juszczyk or a McGlinchey or, Kittle, guys that, are like best friends outside of the team with Jimmy. And some of the fan base, people who do content, they were like, so kind of just, well, we got Jimmy. And it was like, there was no pause and reflection on the fact that this young kid is once again put behind an impossible situation, having to sit out another year, which means he's going to go through the same stuff again next year, the same criticism, the same attention to his shortcomings. Mm-hmm. All his practices are going to get super overanalyzed. And now some people are starting to see, maybe the defense was actually kind of good that he was going against in practice.
It's absurd. You know what, Aaron? Like, and I don't mean to jump in, but like,
no, go ahead.
The kid got so much criticism. He played 5 quarters. 5 quarters. And it's as if the Texans game in week 16, where they had to win, to qualify for the play. They needed to win. That game meant nothing last year, and yet we were hyper-focused on 5 quarters. We couldn't be patient as a fan base and as a media for 5 quarters. And it wasn't just the fans. To me, it was the media fueling it, knowing that the 49er brand gets clicks, quarterback controversies get clicks, and they were crushing the kid before they gave him a chance. And that's my number one thing. Whether you think he's going to be good, whether he is going to be good, can I let it play out a little? Javon Kinlaw has been horrific. Okay, he's got 1.5 sacks. You traded away DeForest Buckner, who could have been a franchise player at defensive tackle. No one says a word. But yet the kid can't play 5 quarters at quarterback without, like, waves of scrutiny from Mike Silver, from Colin Cowherd. To me, it was supercharged and completely unfair. He's 21. Give him a couple of weeks. I watched Jimmy Garoppolo, struggle at the beginning of 2019, but the team kept winning, and they were winning with defense, and it was like, hey, let's pause here. He's working himself back from an ACL. Let's be patient. He was in year 7. This kid's in year 2. Like, we were patient then. I don't understand why everything was moving at such a rapid pace. It was unreasonable to me.
Mentally, I was prepared that if Trey struggled this year and we maybe fell short a little bit, like, I would be okay with it. And I know a lot of people are like, what? Because I'm a Super Bowl or bust guy. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Some people are like, oh, I'm just here for the journey. I love the journey. I'm like, no, I want the Super Bowl. I don't want a journey.
Yeah, we all want Super Bowls.
Yeah. And but with him, I would have made that caveat just because he just hasn't had the time. He hasn't had the exposure. Everything that he would be learning, he'd be learning for the first time, and he needed all that. The failing, being the reason that they lost a game, throwing a couple, game shattering picks, or being the reason that they won, making a throw out of his ass that, no one saw coming. And the fact that he didn't get a chance to do that this year, and that everybody was just so ready to move on, and now it's Jimmy time again, it's just kind of sickening and a little bit of annoying. Again, people have their agendas. People in media have a way, they got to get clicks. They got to get traffic to whatever they do. Especially, if you're on YouTube, you're monetized, you got to get that, whatever. But I wish people would have showed a little bit more empathy. I wish the coach would have showed more empathy. I wish some of the players would have actually felt, acted, at least pretended that they cared that he got hurt. But as I get into the next topic of what you think about the Niners and Jimmy right now, I mean, there is a season to be played. There's still games to be played. And I've kind of moved on because, there's no choice but to. Yeah. What's your current feel on this team with the way they've been playing? I think personally, this is probably one of the most talented 49er teams we've had in recent times. I didn't foresee them, dropping games to the Bears and to the I forgot who they lost to.
Broncos.
And the Broncos, but it is what it is. It's still an early season. The NFC West is looking kind of bad this year. What's your overall kind of feeling of the 49ers as we sit at 3-2 going into Atlanta this Sunday?
It's hard to not look past the injuries. I think the injuries are very concerning, and that can really subdue a season. I mean, we saw it in 2020, saw it in 2018 when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. In terms of Jimmy Garoppolo, I thought he played one of his best games in a couple of years, quite frankly, last week. And the thing is I love that they passed early on the first and second down, and then we're running the ball down the team's throat toward that second half. Like, that's the way it is. I felt like it was the most exciting offense I've seen in like 3 years, because it's always so predictable. First down, we're running. Second down, we're running. Third down, hey, if it's 3rd and 3, we'll run. If it's 3rd and 4, maybe we'll throw a short check down or a smoke screen. It just felt like they were airing it out a little more. Defensively, clearly they're loaded. The Mosley injury is just, and then Nick Bosa. Like, if Nick Bosa is going to be out for 3 or 4 weeks, which I would try to get him right because it's more about January and February than it is about right now. You got to love where they're at, and I'm not fearful of any team in the NFC. So as long as they can keep plugging, I think 4-4, beat Atlanta, you lose to maybe the Rams and the Chiefs or something like that, like 1-2 over the next 3 weeks. I don't care what it looks like. Either lose to the Falcons, beat the Rams. 4-4 would feel like an accomplishment given all the injuries. And I know people don't want to hear that, but I feel like this team kind of needs to get to that point because Trent comes back. Hopefully Bosa's back. Like, the reserves are coming.
The Emmanuel Mosley injury to me was so deflating because it happened at such a time in the game where I kind of wasn't paying as much attention.
I know.
I was like watching the game, but I really wasn't. I was like, man, the Niners got this. The Panthers are absolute dog water. And then it happens and you're like, nah, not another one. And then you hear about the Bosa injury, and then Robbie Gould gets run over. I'm like, what the hell, man?
Jimmy
like,
Ward.
Yeah, he hurts himself on like the first or second play of the game on a special teams rep. First of all, I understand that. I guess you want to get some guys some cardio or whatever football callus by putting them in maybe on a special teams rep to get them kind of going or whatever. But come on now, like I'm not here. I don't really question Kyle too much because I think that's just kind of a stupid thing to do and it kind of goes nowhere. But I don't think the injuries have anything to do with Kyle. I think there's some personally, and I know a lot of people are blaming the turf, but this is an issue the Niners have been dealing with for years.
They're one of the most injured teams.
Yeah, it's something fundamentally wrong. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's I know there was somebody I follow who said he was at practices and training camp, and he said the Niners have one of the shortest stretch periods that he's ever seen. And I'm like, okay. That makes sense.
I had never heard that.
Yeah,
I had never heard that.
And it's weird because a lot of their injuries are always the same. It's always soft tissue, lower body, groins, knees, high ankle sprains. And it's like, man, every year, not like 1 year here, 1 year there. It's every single season. So you're right. It's hard to get super excited when you're like, who's next? Who's going down next? Like for me, an injury to say somebody like Hufanga or Bosa would be season changing because they're that damn good. Hufanga, I had kind of low expectations coming in this year because I thought he was a little bit on like the can't cover in space kind of deal.
We all thought that.
But man, was I wrong. And now I'm like, now I'll wait till the end of the year because every time I buy a jersey, they either get traded or they get moved out or something. So I'm a type of person if like, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'll give you a quick Hufanga story. I went to a bunch of practices this year. And so I'm walking around the little inner ring, and Tim Ryan and me, we always chop it up. Tim Ryan's does the color, if you will, for 49er radio and used to play for the Bears. Tim Ryan walks over and we're chatting it up. And I go, what do you think of Hufanga, huh? At 29. He goes, he sees the field this year. I go, really? You think? He goes, I'm telling you, he sees the field. And through the first 5 games, boy, was he spot on. Because to your point, I mean, it feels like his instincts and his speed and obviously how powerful he is in terms of hitting people, like he's the complete package.
I'm super, like, I told my brother, I was like, because my brother's a Dolphins fan. I get the Sunday ticket every year, so he'll pop in, watch his game, come into my room, watch my game, because he lives in my house at the moment. And he's like, I looked at him, I said, I think we found another 5th round gem here. He's like, man, you guys are ridiculous when it comes to making these picks. I told him, I said, the early rounds for us are kind of hit or miss, sometimes really miss. But these mid-round guys, like who's responsible? What is it? The scouts? Is it Adam Peters? Is it a mix of both? Like the Niners can't get rid of Adam Peters. He has to stay. Even if they end up moving Lynch to maybe like president or something or some other, or if he moves on, you got to keep Adam Peters. To me, I think he is as responsible for the resurgence of this team because you build your team through the mid rounds. Those are your mostly your starters, right? Your stars are your stars, but those guys are a dime a dozen. So seeing guys like Greenlaw and, you know, even an undrafted guy like Azeez Al-Shire, I mean, who's, you know, it's, I'm glad the Niners are competitive and I'm glad that they're talented. I just I'm still of the mindset of win or bust, but it is nice to see that they have a talented team, that they can feel a competitive team every single game. Like you said, this season is a weird season, but the West is down, so I think that they can really, even if they don't have a great record this year, say they 10-7, 11-6, I think that's good enough to win the West. The Niners in the playoffs, to me, once they're in, doesn't matter their seeding, they're dangerous because if they're, if they can get healthy towards the end of the year, they have 2 things that you need to have: defense and a run game coming in the playoffs. But we all know that Jimmy also is, been prone to have some pretty horrific playoff games. If somehow we can get even like an average an average Jimmy performance, if we make it to the playoffs, that might be good enough to get it this year. Because you're right, the NFC, to me, the AFC is the scariest.
Absolutely.
I live in Western New York. I live in Rochester. I'm right near Buffalo. The Bills are really good this year. They have they have the one thing that you can't buy, that you can't. It's hard to. A great quarterback is not something they're hard to find.
Absolutely.
And when you have them, they cover a lot of warts. So even if your defense is injured or you got guys that aren't stepping up, the fact that you have a guy like him, him and Mahomes are super scary. I would rather not face either of them, even with a good defense. But it looks like that might be the matchup again in the AFC Championship game, which I think personally, if the Niners don't do it this year, if the Bills beat the Chiefs, I think the Bills win the Super Bowl personally, which would be their first title ever. Because I mean, they're talented, and Allen's really freaking good. The fact that he got a chance to become who he is, and people gave him time, is awesome. I have a
tweet. I have a tweet from 2016 where I said I used to watch a lot of college football, and I tweeted and I send this to my buddies all the time. This Josh Allen from Wyoming and Brian Hill are going to be. This is the running back. Are going to be stars in the NFL. I did not know he was going to be this good, but I legitimately thought he was going to be a player at the next level because he's so big and so strong and so fast. And it felt like his IQ was there. I know everyone was crazy about the accuracy. It doesn't matter if you're accurate on the underneath stuff. When you can throw 80-yard bombs into the wind, I mean, that dude has got an arm that I think maybe Marino is like the only other guy I can think of who could cut it through the wind the way he does.
Well, I'm watching Marino growing up. His arm was insane. Like the amount of velocity and distance that he could get on a pass was stupid. Elway was pretty good too.
Yes.
Although he was a little scattershot sometimes with his accuracy. It's funny.
Like Trey Lance, he was a nose down guy. So when he would throw it, the nose of the ball would go down. I actually think Trey is more reminding me of, in terms of skill set, of John Elway than any other quarterback. He's kind of big and strong, and he's going to throw it as hard as he can, and he can move just enough, but not a runner. He's just mobile behind the line. And I think people have forgotten how great John Elway was. But like to your point, he was a nose down kind of guy. So he would throw the ball down into guys' guts or into their ankles. And he had a lot of early in his career, a lot of wide receivers were mad at him.
Yeah, he could throw super hard. Like that pullback when he would take it behind him and then whip it was something. It was, man. I grew up. I don't know how your age, but I grew up through a time where there was a lot of damn good quarterbacks that through the years. Montana. I mean, Montana was like the skinny, average arm quarterback, but he was insanely accurate. And then you have, of course, you have all the greats. Even Kelly had a pretty good arm growing up in where I am. Jim Kelly was pretty good.
Oh, I love the K gun.
Yeah, I was a big Jim Kelly guy. I didn't like the Bills as far as like, if the Niners played them. Of course, I'd want the Niners to win because I'm a Niners fan, but I was always a big fan of Jim Kelly and Andre Reed and some of their guys. Bruce Smith, I was a big fan of those guys. Daryl Talley, Lofton.
Oh, yeah. Steve Tasker.
I grew up during an insane era, man. I got to grow up during the Bulls run. I got to be a teenager during the Yankees resurgence and the 49ers winning a Super Bowl in the 94-95 season. I would say from 14 to about 21 was a really good sports time for me. Because all my teams won. And now it's been like forever since anybody's won. And like my nephew is 27 and he's only saw the 2 Super Bowl losses. And I feel so bad. I remember sitting with him at the end of the Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl. And we didn't say anything to each other. We just had our heads down. My brother was sitting there kind of like, oh, I feel so bad for you guys. That was hard, man. That was really hard. I think my dad passed away. I forgot exactly when the Super Bowl was, but it was like, man, can we have this for everything that I've been going through? Can we have this? It didn't happen, but the fact that they were there and hadn't been there in a long time, it was still a great time. But we'll see. I mean, this season is still young. A lot of stuff can happen. Niners have a talented team. I think, hey, if the offense can take over for a little bit and be a little bit more efficient and score more points and kind of help the defense out so it's not so much on them, that would be nice, especially with the injuries that are kind of coming our way. I I guess I could get to one player who, the Niners don't spend a lot of money. When they do, it's usually on an impact player that they expect to make, big changes and pay big dividends. Javarius Ward, to me, is one of the best free agent signings this team has had in maybe the last, 10, 15 years.
Since Justin Smith.
You think? Yeah. Okay.
I really do. I really do.
I haven't seen a Niners corner who could locate the ball and had the arms and the length and the size to actually break it up, get in there. It's always trail, and they get beat on a back shoulder fade, it was like, you name it, they get beat by it. It's just, he's been an amazing pickup. What's your take on Javarius Ward?
I didn't know much about him, right? Because Kansas City, I'm like, Kansas City corner? We're spending all this money? I don't even remember him. Like, what? I watched a lot of Kansas City. I don't know. And then Baldy, we do a lot of stuff with Brian Baldinger from the NFL Network. He texts me. He goes, Joey, you're going to love this Javarius Ward. He's played in like 7 playoff games, and he's really coming into his own, and, late round guy, and he's just developed into a real player. And I'm going, okay. So then I go to practice, and I'm watching. Now, at the time, I believe he was number 35 because he hadn't made the switch to number 7 until the first game of the season. But I'm going, this 35, he moves his hips really well. He's got long arms. He's staying with receivers. Brandon Ayuk was by far and away the best player at camp. It wasn't even questionable. But Javarius Ward was staying with him step for step. Everyone else was getting cooked, and Ward was with him the entire time. And that's carried over into the regular season. I counted 7 pass breakups by the 49er defensive backs. Maybe it was 6 or 5. Somebody else could tell me. Maybe it was 8, but I counted 7 the other day. I can't remember 3 pass breakups from 49er DBs in the last 2 decades. And, for Mosley to go down, that stinks. But him and Ward turning around, making plays on the ball, the physicality to get that arm up and underneath there. They allow a little more physicality because I believe he is kind of known by the referees. He's been a great signing. And now they have playmakers on the D-line, linebackers, and you have 2 now in the secondary in Charvarius and Hufanga. It's changed your defense.
There was a time, I don't know if it was John Lynch who said this, but they talked about having, at least one elite player at every level of the defense, defensive line, linebacker, and secondary. And that's what the Tampa Bay Bucks had. They had Warren Sapp, of course. They had oh my God, I always call him Hardy Nickerson. I know that's not his name. The linebacker.
Well, they had Derek Brooks and Hardy Nickerson.
Okay, so at least he was in there. And then of course John Lynch in the secondary. And that's kind of what this team that. I don't know if it's a John Lynch kind of like how he likes to build his team as well, but they having every level have at least one standout Pro Bowl, All Pro, possibly Hall of Famer one day player. Nick Bosa, to me, I know he's kind of an injury prone guy and he's got muscles on top of muscles, but that man is a man among boys on defense. Same thing with Warner. I think Greenlaw is really coming into his own this year. Yes. He's made a lot of just violent tackles. He's been doing well. Same with Hufanga. These DBs tackle too, which is one thing that I love to see is guys that will stick their nose in. This isn't the Deion Sanders era where you just play patty cake with somebody. They actually get in there and tackle, which sucks because sometimes they get hurt. But even back when we had Deion and Eric Davis, and I loved Eric Davis. Davis used to get kind of abused by the Cowboys, especially Michael Irvin
and Alvin Harper.
Yeah,
Alvin Harper's speed used to really hurt them. Really hurt them. Neither Tim McDonald nor Merton Hanks could ever slide over. I remember going to a bunch of Dallas Cowboys games in the early 90s, and when he signed with the Tampa Bay Bucks, it was like, thank you. Alvin Harper's gone.
Now we have one guy to worry about, not two.
Exactly. And the playmaker, that dude was all world. He was unbelievable. Even if you were draped all over him, he was still going to get his body in front of you, box you out, and make a sweet catch over the middle.
Him and Aikman had a great chemistry as far as especially that deep out that they used to throw all the time. Mm-hmm. Because Aikman had that humongous offensive line that would just stand in front of him like a wall, and that was almost unstoppable, even for a guy like Deion. I remember watching, I think, the NFC Championship game from the year we won against the Chargers, and Aikman hit one of those, hit his back step, turn, threw it, and Deion had perfect coverage, and that thing still got in there. So it was just like, like I said, I grew up during an early and interesting time. There's just a lot of good, talented, great Hall of Fame players. Not that I haven't experienced that in the last 20 years, but like I said, growing up during that era was
not to that level. That level, and there was an all pro at every position.
Yeah. Let's get to the I have this on here, the turf. The NFL, George Kittle made a comment, and I can't say I disagree with him. Like the fact that he goes in the end, in the NBA, there's one wood. The floor is not different wood for different arenas. Same thing, it's not different ice. What's your take on that, or is that just the Niners overreacting because guys get injured all the time?
No, I mean there's science and studies. Like I grew up near Crocker Park here in San Francisco. It was a grass field for years. We used to pick the bottles, broken bottles up off the ground, right? And so they switched over to turf. Now for a public mixed use development where you can use it 365 and to reduce maintenance, makes total sense. For the NFL, like no, like they should all be grass. I don't care what anyone says here because they have studies that have told you there are more ACL injuries, there are more ligament injuries in soccer and in football playing on turf. Now, it's fine for a youth level, but once you get to the professional level, you have to spend whatever it takes. And credit Jed York. I mean, the turf at Levi's wasn't great when they first moved in there. Remember, that was a big talking point.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to go to turf. And instead, they stuck with the grass. And now they've gotten it right. And it seems to be fine. If you can go grass in Washington during the middle of the winter, I think you can go grass in Carolina. It's a shame because it feels like, especially the Mosley injury, the leg stuck into the ground and it twisted and it had no give. And you could see it was going to snap his ACL. I mean, look at the game at MetLife a few years ago. Jordan Reed, Solomon Thomas, and Nick Bosa went down on the same drive. Or back-to-back drives, excuse me. But like it was insane. And then two guys for the New York Giants also went down in that game. So yeah, I mean this is ridiculous that the NFL billions and billions of dollars. I mean the Broncos just sold for $4.5 billion. You can't replace turf. I can grow grass in my backyard, but you can't grow it on the field at Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, isn't Carolina famous for the bluegrass, right? Is it? No, that's Kentucky. Sorry, but
well, it's famous for golf courses, and all the golf courses have grass.
Yeah, they're all beautiful. I don't understand this whole because it seems like the turf back in the day was more just cement.
Yes,
with carpet on top. The one stadium that used to give people hella problems was the Eagles
Veteran Stadium.
Yeah, because they had all those seams and stuff, and guys would just blow their knees out all the time. But like the turf now is almost like sticky. It almost has like a sticky texture to it, especially with like the rubber pellets and stuff. And like you're right, it's like guys can't unfasten their foot fast enough off the turf, and it ends up rolling. Whereas grass, if you move hard enough, you're just going to rip out, whatever sod is underneath your feet. Where this turf is just like insane. Like everybody gets hurt. I hate when people say everybody gets hurt. It's the NFL, but the Niners have just had a ridiculous injury history this last couple of years. Can I ask your opinion on that? Do you think they have a strength and conditioning staff issue? I mean, do you have any idea just from being a sports observer?
No, I have a theory on this. Like the Warriors went through a rash of injuries, right? But it's like, you got a bunch of old guys. You know what I mean? Like old guys get hurt, like in sports, 9 times out of 10. The thing that I would say is that they play a physical brand of football on both sides of the ball. And eventually that toll does catch up to you. Like I look at a team like the Chiefs, right? They don't want to run the ball between the tackles as much, and conversely, when teams are playing against them, I know that the Raiders did the other day. Teams are trying to throw with them and match throw for throw. You're not going to get hit in the throws. Well, not even though Mosley got hurt. You're not going to get hurt as often. These collisions in between the tackles, that's why the Niners have a running back go down every other week. I mean, they haven't had since Shanahan took over, they've had a different leading rusher every single year. That's crazy to me. You know what I mean? This is a guy who hangs his hat on running the ball, and they've had a different guy every single time. Well, part of that is they don't really have a bell cow. The other part is guys get hurt, all the time. I think also there is some just dumb luck. You know what I mean? As in they're unfortunate because of it. But I do believe their brand of football is so physical. That's why it wins in December and in January. But, man, it takes a toll on them. Like, you watch the way Alshire practices, you're like, that guy's going to get hurt. He flies around, and he is throwing all 250 pounds of his body. He's chiseled. Like, he's throwing around. It's a wonder that Fred Warner's played every game of his entire career because that guy flies around too.
My brother said that too. He's watched enough 49er games with me. He goes, "You guys play such a physical style of football, even on offense. Like we got guys that don't go out of bounds. They actually kind of embrace contact, like Debo and Kittle. It's just like, guys, come on." And then for some strange reason, I noticed this on defense and on offense. The Niners like to get a group of guys pushing another one of their guys into a pile to where everybody just gets folded over and crunched underneath. And I was just like, stop. Someone's going to get hurt underneath that pile. Like they do that on offense when they're trying to aid the runner or something and help a guy, get another yard or two. And on defense, I see that constantly with like one guy will come in, another guy will jump on, and then you have one guy come flying over the top, buckling another player underneath. And I'm just like, man, you're right. That's their brand of football is not conducive to healthy joints and contusions and all that kind of stuff. But it sucks. You're right. It's like by the time we get into the playoffs, it's like what's left of us. You know what I mean? We're gassed. Everybody's ready to go home for the year. But I know you're right. It does win in December for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And then the last thing I say is that, guys like Debo and Kittle, they're tone setters on offense because they want to run through people. But my God, if you want to have some longevity, watch Travis Kelce. There's a difference. And I'm not saying like you take away the physicality. Kittle loses an element of his game. But every now and then, just go down. It's all good, dude. Just go down. You're not going to run through 7 guys. And the guy's got a pop patella and a hurt shoulder and this, that, and the other. It's like pick and choose your spots. It's okay. We know you're a stud.
I have I've had shoulder surgery twice just from I've been working since I was 16. A lot of just like wear and tear on the shoulder. I have a slight tear in my rotator cuff, and it bothers me. The fact that man can play with whatever he's got going on, a torn labrum or whatever, I can't live with. Like I'm getting to the point where I need to have another surgery eventually, just to see if it'll stop. Because I have a lot of gnawing pain. I have probably 20% strength in my right arm. Like if I got into a brawl with somebody and threw hands, and we got into a wrestling match, and I'm 6'3", 260. I would be toast. It don't matter how big I am. I would be done because my right arm is so weak. And I'm just like, how does this guy play football with like a busted wing? And I don't know.
When you walk by him in practice, he's massive. It's great. And he's not thick. Like when you go by Kelce, he's thick. And you're like, oh yeah, that he looks like he's been that size his whole life. To me, Kittle looks like he was a skinny dude who put on 50 pounds of muscle, like straight up, just straight bulk. And that's why I do believe that at times when I look at his frame, he may have like what I call wrestler syndrome. There's just too much bulk on the frame that's not built for that. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes just use
Bosa kind of gives me that feeling too, that you're so tightly wound that like any like fast move on that tight muscly physique, something's gonna pop. You know what I mean? Like one of the talks when I talked to Larry one time, he said one of the things about a guy like DJ Jones is he was so big, and a lot of those big guys, they get a lot of lower leg injuries because their body is just so massive. So like the ankles and the feet and the high ankle sprains, and like they play in a position where they're pushing and using their legs. So speaking of DJ Jones, 2 signings happened today. Ty Mcgill, he played against us in the preseason. He was on the Minnesota Vikings, had a pretty fantastic preseason. I think he had 2 or 3 sacks, 1 sack. I don't know. Yeah, he was very active. He played well against us. And then the last preseason game he played. And then they signed kicker Sam Sloman to the practice squad. Do you have any idea who those guys are? Or do you have any, are you just looking at them as more like just a precaution signing?
Well, the kicker is worrisome because I do think Robbie Gould got laid out the other day and it looks like he's hurt. I mean, it looked like to me he was going to get hurt. Defensive line. I have 0 worries about defensive line because of Chris Kocurek. They have shined up so many people to make plays on this line, which is kind of one of the points I brought up today on our show. Go back to the DeForest Buckner trade. They made a bad trade. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's a bad trade. We can come up and say it. Like, they traded a first-round pick. They took Javon Kinlaw. They took that money. He was making $10 million in year 1. And then they gave Eric Armstead essentially about the money that they were going to give DeForest Buckner. DeForest has doubled in terms of production, both players combined in tackles for losses, quarterbacks hits, pressures, sacks, balls deflected. I mean, you pick the metric. He's been so much better. So my theory was, and this is why I was so angry at the Niners when they took Javon Kinlaw, Don't take defensive tackles. Stop it. Stop taking them in the first round. Unless they are a 3-down lineman who can rush the passer, just don't do it. We rotate so many guys. They found Ridgeway this year. They found Givens a couple of years ago.
I love Givens.
I do too. They found DJ Jones in the 6th round. They find fat, big interior defensive linemen. They're really good at that, and they're shining them up. Why would you invest a first-round pick into a D tackle? And he's got a bad knee right now. Kinlaw has 1.5 sacks through 3 years. I like Kinlaw. I hope he can get well. I hope he can, at some point, be a player for this team. But right now, that was a horrible trade. And my philosophy moving forward, stop spending money and wasting resources on D tackles. You're just going to rotate these guys. Like they picked up Charles Omenihu. Charles Omenihu for whatever, a 5th or 6th round pick. What a great find.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like he can play. They took this kid 13th, 14th overall in Javon Kinlaw. He can't play. And I'm not crushing him. It's just the reality. It's okay to admit sometimes you make a bad trade. You make a bad draft pick.
I just think sending a top 15 pick on a space eater and not a guy that can actually make plays in the backfield 100%. Is a horrible move. He's a space 100%. Eater. I don't want to hear about a space eater with, they use him for space. So to help Bosa. No, I want an interior pass rusher because it shouldn't always be Bosa or bust every single time we rush the passer. That's why I'm glad Drake Jackson, once he gets some more finesse to his game and a lot more, maybe a couple different moves, he'll be an interesting player. Go ahead.
No, the Drake Jackson thing's interesting. So, you whiffed on this trade. You nailed the Drake Jackson pick. You got him late in the 2nd round. He's a first-round talent. You walk up to him and you see him and you're like, oh, had he went to Alabama or Georgia, his body would be better. He went to USC. It was a nightmare. He was close to home. I heard he wasn't on campus. It looked like he has not been in a NFL,
soft.
Elite. Yeah, he's a little doughy. And I mean this because, you're going to watch his body transform from year 1 to year 2.
Yep.
And I think you're going to see this kid pop next year. He's already flashing. He's got raw ability. Wait till he gets the food regimen and the nutrition and the weight room down. USC was a nightmare last year, and at least the last couple of years with their coaching and whatnot. And he's a kid who's from LA. So I really think, you whiffed on Kinlaw. You nailed the Drake Jackson pick. This kid's going to be a stud.
I think they just need not to have first-round picks. Just go right to the 2nd or 3rd round.
You feel me?
Eliminate the variable. Get rid of it. He was a nice draft pick for sure. I when it comes to an interior guy like Javon Kinlaw, they had all these sort of medicals on this guy, and they still drafted him. I don't know what they think they're going to be able to change when a guy has, from what a lot of people were saying, he's got arthritic knees for a guy who's in his early 20s. Like I have an arthritic shoulder probably, but I'm 43 almost.
Exactly.
And I wasn't always beat up. I've been working since I was, the mid 90s. I was 16. I've worked heavy jobs, a lot of lifting, and just your body breaks down. But this cat's in his early 20s and he's already tore up.
Well, it's sad when you see him at practice. He can't practice. He's on one knee. He's got his helmet off and he's on one knee. And you're like, dude, this guy's got to play. You know what I mean? You're 23 years old, dude. You got to get in there.
But I don't even blame him. I blame the front office.
No.
I can't blame the kid because he is a kid. I mean, he's massive.
He's humongous.
If he played to his size, to me, he's like a really, really poor man's Warren Sapp as far as what I thought he could be. But he's probably never going to reach that place. But man, you look at him and you're just like, oh yeah, this dude's a player. And then you watch him play, you never hear his name, you never really see him flash. He's just a space eater. And for me, a top 15 pick should be used on a guy like a Tristan Wirfs.
Or a playmaker.
Somebody that can move the ball. One thing the Niners, I don't like when they do is I don't like when they draft running backs either. I think they reach every single time. And like Elijah Mitchell, you have zero expectations. And then he comes in and he's really good. I mean, he is injury prone, but he's a 6th round pick. So I'm not expecting a lot. And then when you go and you keep drafting these early round, but see, I understand why they draft the early round guys because they go through so many. So I kind of don't have an issue with it. But at the same time, two things that I don't like you said, don't draft the defensive tackles in the top 15 or in the 1st round, and don't draft running backs. They haven't drafted an early running back unless he's like an all-timer, if it's a Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, Dickerson, whatever, one of those guys, but we'll see. I mean, I can't say that the Niners aren't under talented. I mean, they're a very, very talented team, but we can pick at it because that's what your job is to do, and that's what I like doing on my channel.
Well, the running back thing is interesting. So, like right now, I want them. Like I just referenced the trade. They traded away to go get a pick, and we all agree like these early round picks, they're not great at them. They made a couple of shrewd trades that have helped this organization. Jimmy G for a second rounder. Say what you want about D Ford. When they got a second round pick for D Ford, he helped their defense tremendously.
Yes, he did.
I wish he would have been healthier. They spent a lot of money on him. It didn't work out after year one, but in year one, he was great. Like just great. He was exactly what we needed. Now, the other trade that they made in season was Emmanuel Sanders, and then they also traded for Trent Williams. To me, the guy that they should trade for right now, and I know people are going to go, no, it costs too much money. He's always hurt. Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey can line up in the slot. You need a slot receiver. You could throw to him on the edges. Jimmy G is a check down type of a guy, and I don't mean that in a negative. I'm saying that's where he gets most of his throws off. You put him and Debo on the field at the same time. Think of the pressure you're putting on a defense. Like if McCaffrey can be had, I'd throw a second and a fourth round pick yesterday for him.
See, I'm a same team, but I'd rather go make a move on a guy like Brian Burns.
Well, I would love Brian Burns
because you can never have enough pass rush. But I talked to somebody one of my co-hosts on my Monday show. We call it the NWO, Niners World Order. And thanks. And he's like, no, not another defensive lineman. Leave it be. But I'm like, I can dream, right? I mean, he's like, but we don't need pass rush. I'm like, but you never can have enough. So I see both. And you're right. My concern with Christian McCaffrey is he's hurt a lot.
Well, it's that turf too. That's another thing. I mean, he plays on the turf. And if you're going to be a run first team, I mean, you're talking about one of the few dynamic superstars who can house it. That's the element that Raheem Mostert gave him. That Elijah led the league last year in 20-plus yard runs. You put CMC on this team, I'm telling you, man, I know there's salary cap stuff. They're going to have to eat some of the money. That's my personal dream. I want CMC on this team.
You're selling me on it. I think I might have to sign up for that. Quick look ahead to the Falcons, and then we'll talk a little Star Wars in the last bit here. Another one of those games where the Niners are the better team, and they just need to go out there and take care of business, win by 25, or do you see this being
a trap?
The last week felt like a trap to me.
I thought so.
And people are like, "What are you talking about? They're horrible." I'm like, "That's the reason why it's a trap."
Exactly.
Because you're expected.
No Bosa too. Like I keep coming back to the same thing. If you have to sit Bosa for 2 or 3 weeks, it's not that worst thing in the world. He needs to be properly on par for the playoffs. Like we all agree. And look, you got to make the playoffs. I get all that. They can withstand and hopefully win without him. But this is one of those games. They got playmakers. Their defense flies. I know it's really underrated, this defense. A lot of people don't like it. Jarrett is a beast in the middle. And that worries me with Jake Brendel. The offensive line has played a lot better for the 49ers. I think a lot of us. I still worry about Jimmy staying upright. And these are the kind of games, I overlook the opponent because we have Kansas City next week. Yes. These are the kind of trap games that I worry about. And so I'll know what their focus level is in the first half. I really will. If they let this team hang around, and that we know this is going to be a closer game than we want. If they put up 14 in the first half, it's a wrap.
It's funny. I had a stream with one of my great YouTube buddies, and he thought the game was going to be a blowout, and I thought the game against Carolina was going to be close. And for the first half, I'm like, "See, told you. See, we're letting them hang around." And then, of course, the Niners, blew the doors off of them in the second half. I kind of see a similar thing too. I think the Niners, like maybe they wake up. I hope they put them out of their misery early. Because I would love to see guys not be on the field and rest guys. That's the one thing when you blow the doors off of somebody, you could actually take players out. When every game is like live or die, and we got to go right down to the last 6-8 minutes. It's kind of like, man, what are the old days when like the Niners would win like 45-10, and Steve Young would be in the fourth quarter on the sideline, and we'd be watching Steve Bono or Elvis Gerback or something.
Yep,
so
those were the days.
So. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this game with the Falcons just because it's football, but I am a little worried that it's one of those trap. I think every game's a trap game when you're not playing an elite team across from you. But
it's true. It's the NFL. Crazy stuff happens.
It does. So let's talk Star Wars. First of all, you're about my age. When did you get into it? And How diehard would you say you are when it comes to Star Wars?
So growing up, me and my brother's 5 years younger than me, 4 or 5
Okay.
years younger than me. We
So was mine.
we had three VHSs. We were not very rich. Okay, we were very poor.
Me
So
too.
we had three VHSs, and one of them I taped off of television. We had Caddyshack, Ghostbusters, and Star Wars: A New Hope. Those were the three movies that we watched over and over and over and over again. Ghostbusters was the first movie I ever memorized, start to finish. And then Star Wars, me and my brother obsessed over it. We went to, at the time, it was Hollywood Video and Blockbuster. We went so many times. We literally owned like 4 different VHS copies of Empire Strikes Back. Yes, and we wore them out, right? That was our movie. And then like Star Wars, if I were to like rank where I'm at on Star Wars, my brother's like a 10. And when I mean 10, I mean read every comic in the Reddit. He's seen every comic strip. He's got all the figurines, everything. I would put myself in like the 8 to 9 category.
That's right.
I watch everything. I watched Bad Batch. I've watched obviously all of the random stuff that they got on Disney Plus. Love Mandalorian. I'm watching Andor right now. Like, I love Star Wars. I'm just not into the books like my brother is. I love all the movies and all that stuff. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I wasn't a book guy. I tried. I tried to
I'm
do
not
the
a reader.
books, but I'm not a reader. Yeah, I have massive ADD.
Yeah.
So I'm like a dog when squirrels run by. You're like, whoa, what happened? It's horrible. So, but I got into Star Wars like in mid 2006. I used to clown people so hard to watch Star Wars.
Really?
Then I watched Revenge of the Sith, and I was hooked.
Really?
Hooked. So I got into Star Wars a little late, although I knew about it for a long time, and I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
Like Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. Those were kind of my favorite Star Wars movie. And I'm going to ask you your favorite one.
Yeah.
Mine is Empire Strikes Back. That's my favorite movie of the original trilogy. Even as a whole, I still like. I think it's like Empire, and then Revenge of the Sith is right underneath it. What was
Revenge of the Sith is dramatically underrated. The final 35 minutes is like ADD, I got ADD too. Just like blown into my face. And they're going back and forth. And
with the John Williams soundtrack.
It's incredible.
Listen, I watched Superman growing up. I was a big Christopher Reeve fan. I love those movies.
Yes,
I love Back to the Future.
Me too.
I'm a huge Back to the Future fan.
Michael J. Fox.
My heart breaks for him, what he's dealing with right now. I saw him. There was a get together with him and Christopher Lloyd. First of all, I'm old, so they're really old. But I was a huge. I memorized. I think was it Back to the Future 3, first or third. I pretty much can recite the whole movie, and I used to for my dad before he passed. He used to love it. He's like, "What's that scene again?" And I would, of course, reiterate it for him.
Brother. That's me and my brother. We reenacted the whole thing.
Yes, and as far as Star Wars, I got into it, and then I became obsessed. I was always big on wanting to know what happened during the 20-year gap.
Yes.
That Obi-Wan series to me, especially the episode where you find out that little girl who became Reva was there for Order 66, and she stared him right in the face. My mom was watching it with me. Yeah.
The lightsaber glowing off her face.
Yeah, my mom watched it with me, and she was like, oh, because it's heartbreaking because this dude straight up murdered children because he thought he was going to somehow amass power. And to me, those are the kind of things, the deep stuff, not like the fun, not the Jar Jar Binks or the Ewoks. I like when they really get into like the psychological stuff was when I really get hooked. So like Revenge of the Sith with his mulling over his decisions before he turns evil. That you're right. It's very underrated. Very, very underrated.
All right. So you're asking me my favorite of the movie. So I'd probably lean Empire Strikes Back because that's my brother's favorite, but I'll give you my favorite scene in all of them. And this is going to be off the board here. All right. My favorite scenes of Star Wars ever. There's one in particular. I cry every single time. And it's personal to me because I've failed so many times in my life. I've been a jackass so many times.
Same.
And it's Yoda sitting down with old man Luke. It was in one of the number 8, I guess it was. And he's talking about the Jedi books. And Yoda starts laughing and he burns the hut and he's going to burn the Jedi book. And he's talking about failure. And it's a 2-minute little thing on failure. I tear up every single time I watch it. When I'm feeling really low, I know it sounds really lame, but
No,
when I'm feeling really low, I go back. I have all these different, spots that are archived, and I go back and I watch that, and it's so inspirational. Now, what's my favorite scene in the history of Star Wars? All right, my favorite scene in the history of Star Wars. It's a twofold. Number one, in the Obi-Wan show, Obi versus Darth Vader, when Darth Vader's face is like cracked in half and it's going back between blue and red, and he's like, "I failed you," and that whole dialogue, powerful, like
very
literally
powerful. Yes.
The other one, Rogue One, the final scene with Darth Vader
Hell
when he's
yes.
coming through.
Oh,
I was like, "You have got to be kidding." Rogue One is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Me
I watch
too.
it all the time. And that scene with Darth Vader, when you see his power and you just see the saber light up, it's video games. Because like I played a lot of video games.
So do I.
Video game.
That scene, I was at a theater. I got in there really late, so I was one of the last people to get a seat. It was packed for Rogue One, which was weird because Star Wars people are a little bit finicky. Some people are like, this is this, and I hate this. And I was on the very bottom row, right in front of the screen, looking up. It was the most uncomfortable thing ever. When that scene hit and he popped, I was like, "Oh!" Like I audible gasp because I'm a huge Darth Vader fan. He's my favorite character.
Oh, he's the best.
My ringtone recently, I found a music clip from the very last episode of Obi-Wan when Vader talks to the Emperor. That like really deep Darth Vader theme. I'm like, I want that as my ringtone. I've always been a Vader guy because I always felt like I had a lot in common with Anakin. I have a good heart. I try to be good for everybody and help everybody at the same time. There's a little bit of like anger and a little bit of animosity, and I hold on to things, old grudges, and I'm like, I always identified with Vader because in the end, he sacrificed himself to save his son. So the light was never extinguished from him. So like I said, the Star Wars for me, it's less about the lightsabers and all the, Yoda being goofy and screwing with Luke and Empire, but it's like the psychological stuff.
100%.
Yeah, that's the stuff that I've always gotten into.
The robots. I have a dog, or I have a couple dogs, and I don't know, dog's man's best friend. That's for me. Like so many times I'm low and I come through the door and the dog's just waiting, like, "Oh my God, you're here!" It's like the best thing in the world, right? You get depressed and stuff. The robots are their dogs. R2-D2 is the best. I'm sorry, he's the best. Here's my other favorite scene. If I was going to go for all like the canon movies, right? Return of the Jedi, when Jabba has Princess Leia in the bikini, which everybody thinks is so hot, and I'm right there with them. Okay, and that little tiny little
Salacious
thing.
crumb.
Oh, okay. When Luke jumps off the, like, I don't know, the jumping board, if you will, and then R2-D2 shoots him the lightsaber, and Boba Fett and Han Solo and everybody's there, and Lando Calrissian, that might be, and they're in the sand dunes with the pit, the Sarlacc pit, that might be one of my favorite scenes of all time. And Luke jumps up onto the main boat, he's got the lightsaber. I don't know why, it gets me every single time.
Everybody's talking about my my lights that I have back here. He said they're two lights. Of course, I got to go with the red because the dark side is. Listen, in the end, the light prevails, but dark side is always cooler. It's edgy. It's mental. Like everybody's got issues, and I relate more to that anyways. So,
how about Ewan McGregor? I think Ewan McGregor, as much as I love everybody else, Ewan McGregor might be my favorite actor throughout the entirety of the series.
Yes.
He is Obi-Wan Kenobi to me.
Same with Mark Hamill. He is Luke Skywalker.
Yes.
The fact that they did what they did in Rise of Skywalker, not Rise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi, I think it is.
Yes.
I wish, I understand what the directors were going for, but I was a little bit like, man, that's not the Luke I remember. I
know.
Although Lucas said he was going to do something similar, where Luke would be kind of in hiding for something, but just how they made him like this curmudgeon-y old turd who throws his lightsaber behind him. I'm like, oh no, no, it's Luke.
I know.
Because he's so, like, when you see him in is it the Mando? That's where he's training.
How good was that Mandalorian scene at the end of season 1 when he came in? I was like, you got to be kidding me! Again, another time I cried because
emotional tears. Well, because the music and.
Baby Yoda?
You get to see Luke at where his powers have increased.
Absolutely.
And it's 5 years later, so his powers have increased since the end of Return of the Jedi, and he's like super badass. And seeing the scene where he's training Grogu,
oh my God,
that CG has gotten really good. all I got to say, what's your show? Is it Mando or is it Boba? I'm kind of a Mando guy.
Yeah, I thought Boba Fett was okay, just okay. Personally, I didn't think it was as good as it could have been, because Boba, to me, like one of my brother's favorite villains is Boba Fett.
Of course.
And like, we didn't know anything about Boba Fett for like 35 years, like literally. And so like my brother had the toy with Slave One, which is his vehicle that he would fly around in, and I thought he made him kind of weak. Like, that's just me. I thought he was kind of. Mandalorian, to me, I that's my ringtone. Dun, 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 dun,
my brother,
dun,
he has
dun,
the
dun, dun.
he has that the chime from Mandalorian as his notification. Yeah, I was like always suspicious with the television shows. Like, oh, I don't know.
I know, me too.
I've only watched one episode of Andor, and I know it's people are like it's slow, but it picks up.
I like it.
I got to get into it because it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
I'm big on the old trilogy characters. So like anytime there's stuff with old trilogy characters, like I'm really looking forward to the Ahsoka Tano series and seeing a live action Ezra Bridger. What's your thought on that? Did you watch Rebels at all? And how
I did. Rebels was tough because I was a little too disconnected from Star Wars at that time. My brother and me ended up Netflixing it during COVID, and we went back and watched or I guess it's Disney. We Disneyed it the entire time. No, I'm here for it. One of the other ones was Bad Batch that I got into, and it kind of spins off of all of those cartoons, but it wasn't Rebels. What was it called? There was another one, and it was with Luke and it was with Anakin and Osaka. What was the other? It's not Rebels.
It's the Clone Wars series.
Clone Wars. Thank you. I was trying to think what it was called. Clone Wars. And so that one was super fascinating to me because that explained a lot of the clone stuff from the beginning that I didn't know about. And then the Stormtrooper stuff. Like, it tied a lot of things that were kind of cloudy in my head.
Yeah. I think my two life really are Star Wars and 49ers. Used to be big into like multiple sports, but as I've gotten older, like, yes, I'm a Yankee. I didn't really grow up a Yankees fan. I became a Yankees fan at like 16, like during their resurgence. But baseball to me is such a long season, you know? Oh, it's so hard. Same with basketball. Football to me, every game counts. Every game means something. Injuries to key players are huge. Like it could turn a season. So that I love football, but like Star Wars to me is like anytime I'm in like a depressed state of mind, there's so much I can go to or like watch. Like I've missed a lot of work the last couple of years with physical stuff with my shoulder and stuff, and man, I filled all my time. I've watched I've watched Cobra Kai.
Oh yeah,
big Karate Kid fan. Of course, Stranger Things. I grew up during the 80s, so all that stuff.
It's the Goonies, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all of it. It's all of it. To me, there's streaming television has become where it's at. I think TV should just be, I mean, except for football and maybe some sports shows, just get rid of regular episodic television. There's no need for it anymore.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
I appreciate you coming on, man.
Aaron, no worries, man.
I'm going to let you go. I'd love to do this sometime in the future again. Yes. I know you're a busy guy. I pay attention to all my radio guys that I pay attention to. I know you guys have like really busy lives because you have life outside of your radio. So the fact that the fact that you were able to come on here and this has been like a work in progress for me. I kind of gave up on it. I'm like, he's so busy, and I've done this with other people.
Sorry, I pushed it off, man. I'm glad we did it.
I'm glad we did it too. I appreciate the conversation. Listen, for anybody, I just want to say hello to everybody in the chat who I didn't really talk to. This was the Joe Shasky show, so it was nothing personal with the comments, but I wanted to interview Joe Shasky. Talk 49ers, talk Star Wars.
Hell yeah.
Thanks everybody for the participation and being here and watching this. And Joe, I appreciate you coming on and making time for me out of your busy life. Till next time, everyone, stay safe and healthy. Go Niners, and I'll see you next time.